Elle Cole. I was blown away by the depth of her experience and her financial acumen, and the fact that it's not solely based on numbers. It's a view that goes far beyond that. It goes into the community, it goes into the interrelations within the area, it goes staff relations. I mean, it was all encompassing. I had a chance to meet with her yesterday for a couple of hours and was glad, number one, that I took the time to be able to do that, but number two, that I was able to see the depth of what she has to offer. Scott Sazak is working in a similar type of community, similar type of challenges, and I think he could be a candidate. He would not be my top choice. You know, he's learned it through action and through engagement within his community, and he's learning, and as we all are. I'm a lifelong learner, and I admit that entirely. John Matthews has done from my perspective, done a great job of solidifying our government function and helping us move forward from where we were in a period without a city manager. And I know the hardship that placed on staff, and he was a salve to bring something better and have a better outcome and have changing the culture that was present. So I'm very appreciative of all of the candidates we have. John being the one that's currently the interim, and from my perspective, if I had to rank them, it would be Elle, John, and then Scott in terms of 1, 2, and 3. And we haven't given you the opportunity because you were going to, at least on part of this, was to give us a recommendation or some feedback. So if there's anything feedback-wise that you'd like us to have that I may need in helping make the decision, I'd appreciate your insights. So
I thought they were all three really good candidates. I think I think all of them showed depth of knowledge operationally that would run the community. I think there was two that had good connections with the community, and I would concur with your assessment.
okay.
Anything else, Commissioner?
No, unless anybody has questions on the board to post that to me.
Any questions for Commissioner Gregg? Commissioner Lawson, or Mayor?
Yeah, you know, Elle Cole again, I think, was very impressed with. She's very professional, comes across very professional. Soft-spoken person, but I think probably a person not to take lightly. Very highly educated with numbers and budgets, and her financial background is impressive. I like it that she's grounded in the area, so to speak, that she's, you know, has a place, I think at Boyne Mountain maybe, and has spent, you know, lots and lots of vacations here, lots of time here, has a connection with the community, a little vested interest here. Scott, I think Scott and I, if we knew each other, we'd probably be very good friends. I think he's a very extremely personable guy, very funny, and also easy to work with. A lot of experience. I think he's probably brutally honest. But I think on the downside, he'd be somebody that people would not take seriously for a period of time. I think he is somebody to take seriously, but I think his humorous manner might be off-putting to some people, to not take him seriously as they should. Again, I think he is somebody to take seriously, but that would be something he would have to work through, and people would take time to, or need time to take him seriously. John, yeah, he's I think he's come in, I think he's done a great job. impressed me most with John since his time here is, he took the time to learn the community, he took the time to learn, the street names, the players in town, he's learned the people, he's, learned the boards, he does hold employees accountable. Recommended by 2 department heads and a township manager. I wish during the questions, he would actually answer the questions instead of giving us a philosophy on what he meant or how he would do things versus how he has done things. He's very polished and approachable. Again, I know there's, I guess I would agree with what Bob said, if I had to rank him, I would rank Elle, John, and Scott.
Okay, Commissioner Reed.
I was just marking down. Yeah, it was great. It was very interesting. All 3 of them had very, very great interviews, very good points. Elle, again, going into succession that we did the interviews, Elle was very dynamic. A lot of, there was no doubt that there's a ton of accounting experience, and I think she would handle all that very easily and everything. The only concern that seemed to come across from her for me was just a little bit too afraid to be the bad guy, I guess is the best way to put it. Would really search just, again, she asked the question to us, what if you had a magic wand, what did we want? My answer was, I want a leader. I want somebody, we have all the components in this community. We have everything. We need somebody to lead it. And so, you can't always lead with consensus. Somebody, you have to be a decision maker and a buck stops here kind of person. So that's my only concern with her. Other than that, very dynamic, very broad, scope. She has, been involved in a lot of different things, from drain commissioner and stuff like that. So, great candidate. Scott, again, we're only doing our personal opinions. Scott, struck me as where we came from. Not, the 2 of the candidates were very, dynamic, very, outgoing is not the word, because that's not the word to use, but he just seemed, again, this community needs the leader. It needs the dynamic person being out there and leading this community. And Scott had a lot of experience, similar situations and stuff. He's done some great things, with that are very critical, to our community. But in my opinion, it feels too much like we were coming from. John, again, George just said, he stepped right in. He had, took the team from day one and started, molding them back together. Not that they were ever apart, but I mean bringing the whole city staff back together. And because there was concerns, rightfully so, with all different aspects of the staff wondering, all right, where's our direction? What are we doing? And I think he stepped right in. I think he got very integrated into the community quite easily, quite well. Him and Elle both have, very powerful personalities, I believe. he's done what he said and said what he's done since he's been here. And, it's been refreshing because again, that's what we needed, was a leader. And, so if we're going in the ranking process, mine would be, John, Elle, and Scott. And that's, I feel like Scott's getting slighted in this a little bit, but, he was very appreciative of even the interview and stuff, and I think he's a great city manager, but not just for us at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner Pritchard.
I'm gonna go at this in reverse order, and I'll be straight up. As everyone knows, I was the only nay vote when it came to Mr. Matthews is becoming our interim. And the reason for that is I'm a strong believer in integrity. And there were some concerns with regard to integrity and representation in his previous situation with Elk Rapids and reason for leaving. So unfortunately, that did not improve in terms of additional information that I've learned by going through their public records, recordings, the PIP that he was placed on and the reasons for it. But setting that aside, I would concur that John has come into the community, or come into with the staff and help smooth it and relieve it and give a burden removed, because the staff did an amazing job in that period of time that we didn't have one. I would also disagree, however, with the communication. I counted, and there have been 7 emails in the course of 8 weeks, and I was taken to task for taking too much time on the manager's report. In contrast, with our previous city manager, and did another 8-week count, just to happen to be the 8 weeks before he left, and there were 47 emails. And so there wasn't the need to go through the detail, because things were being shared with us. We're volunteers, we're not full-time employees either. And so that was helpful with Mr. King, is that he raised his hand and let us know. And I guess I'd use the most recent example, which was, the difference was 2 days ago, we received a notice or an email that required immediate action. And the statement was made that, anyway, point being, the leadership was not there. And that unfortunately was taken up by someone else. I would look for in any communication from any leader, any one of our candidates, as was stated, here's the problem, here's the solution, these are the steps that I'm taking, please add any other input that you would have. And instead, this was, here's the hot potato, let me know what you want us to do. And that, to me, was indicative of where other things were done. You've been great at community relations, going out and talking to people and settling things down, but we gave him 2 major assignments. I think we all concurred, and that was getting his hands on the CWRF projects and hiring a department planning to replace Scott McPherson. And I don't know that that's been achieved. So that's my feeling on, I guess the interim manager had a unique opportunity as their trial run, and I didn't see the leadership that I would like to see. I don't know that it's, anyway. With Scott, George, I think you nailed it. I mean, I did speak with Scott outside of this interview, and his style is different. He uses humor. He uses a lot of humor, and I think it's great. I think he has more experience than we're giving him credit for. Certainly, his comment about the relationship with, having worked in the legislature and having connections to other municipal leaders, I think would be helpful in some of our things like MEDC and some initiatives that are going to take some support by our elected, higher leadership. He did speak at length, I think, about some of the relationships with his departments, and he walked into a turmoil situation as well. They had complete turnover of all of their departments, their leadership. That did settle down once he got there, but I think he is what he said. His style is what he said it would be based on my conversations with him. That he engages, he goes up and sees and meets people, and as far as his staff and goes on from there. I think he has a stronger financial background than we talked about. And he clearly is a lifelong learner. I mean, the gentleman's continued to engage in his own learning and development. So I think he's got the practical background with the various departments that he'd have to lead. And I think we would do well with him, but I do think his style would take a while to get used to. Once you get used to it, that might be okay, but that would be a challenge, I think, initially. Then I'm gonna come to Elle. I was also, I took time that she engaged us all before today. And that's someone that actually, obviously set a plan to do the best that she could to engage this community, understand it for herself, and that's leadership. That was, to me, was huge. I do feel she's stronger beyond the CFO than perceived in terms of leadership. And this part of the benefit was conversation yesterday, as well as today, as far as identifying a problem, engaging the right people to solve it, coming forward with a recommendation, and then asking, for a support and approval by the council to proceed forward. So I think she would be a good steward. The financial piece, yesterday and today, she talked about strategic planning and tying it to the goals and objectives in the community. I thought that was spot on, understanding we can't have everything that we may want, but we certainly need to get what we need, and also the ability to forecast the future expenditures. Penny wise, pound foolish, you kick the can down the road. And I do believe that she would be very strong in the development of the capital improvement plan. So from a leadership standpoint, I think she would be tougher than you might imagine, but also very supportive of the staff and listening. And then the leadership, in my opinion, it is there. And so mine would be Michelle, number 1, Scott, number 2, and John, 3.
Thank you. You said Scott too, right?
Correct.
I'm just taking notes. Okay. Alrighty, please bear with me. I have notes on like 8 different pieces of paper here all over the place. I kind of have some talking points that established. So please just bear with me as I try and get through all of this. It's going to be a little bit of a rant, but I'll just get started. Please bear with me as I cover a ton of notes and talking points that's leading to my decision. I want to share my thorough thoughts to give my commissioners, but also probably more importantly to give members of our community an opportunity to walk through my decision-making process. This will be the biggest and most important decision I'll make in the last 4 years sitting here as an elected official. So I want to make sure I'm very thorough in walking through my decision-making process and what my perspective is for everyone involved in this. Kind of getting started, I'm just gonna be real transparent. I'll just start with my ranking. My number 1 is Elle Cole, my number 2 is John Matthews, my number 3 is Scott. I'll start with Scott. I think I agree with a lot of perspectives that's been shared with from the commission, that the experience is kind of lacking a little bit, and I think he really hinted to that himself, especially towards the end of his interview and with his responses that he provided. Some of his responses on the questions, and I know this commission has heard me say it, I'm a stickler with behavioral-based interview process, and here's the question, and give me a real-life example as to, in a response to that. Everyone can go through a philosophy of, well, what do I do when there's a fire? Well, the first thing to do is trying to, put that fire out, whether that resources is calling 911, running to the nearest fire extinguisher, so on and so forth. So the generalizations in these types of, this level of interviews is something I struggle with personally with my experience in this process. So that was a big aspect. I've highlighted certain interview questions here. I just don't want to go through and start this off with talking negatively about his responses specifically. So I'm going to talk about my top 2 candidates, what I liked about these top 2 candidates, and the difference between 1 and number 2 position, and why I'm arriving at that difference for these top 2 candidates. So I'll go to John being my number 2 candidate. I really agree with the comments that's been made about John, that he's come in, and I think he's done a good job. And I'll say this, I think John's definitely an improvement when it comes to him working with the staffing pool from administration to certain departments throughout the city. And I think it was in one response John provided, but what I wrote here as a side note is this shows he has, he's got the ability to address issues as they come in. I've seen that from John, whether they're complaints from the city, city community members, whether it's an issue with a leaking valve that's leading to water flooding, whether it's East Pine Street Lake. He responded quickly to that email yesterday we were all involved in. Was tentative, responded on, the willow tree and that fiasco, and he's just been very tentative to making sure that he's like, oh yep, cool, I'll get to that, and then it just never gets attended to, and the conversation is never addressed again. So that's definitely an improvement from my experience in the last 4 years here. But with that being said, I think the difference between Elle and John is that Elle is clearly displaying an ability not to only address issues as they come to her, and that's displayed through her resume and kind of her responses and the interview process, that she's the type of person that's addressing issues as they land on the desk, but also very strategic with planning how to move from being a reactive leader to a proactive leader. And if we want to find a leader that's just reactive, that's great. For me, personal experience, you have the opportunity to be successful with that style of leadership, but I know a proactive leadership style leads to a very well strategic process that eliminates the minutia and the draining of being so reactive and having to run to put this fire out, and okay, we're dealing with these 3 fires right now, but a big one just popped up and we got to be really reactive to this one, and then we're going to put these 3 things on hold and we'll come back to them hopefully in 6 months if we remember that. And that's kind of an experience that I've had specifically being in this position for the last 4 years. So it'd be really nice to have a leader that moves us from a reactive environment and culture to a more proactive environment and culture. And so that is one deciding factor for me between those top 2 candidates. I will say, I had one department head reach out to me with feedback on John. They talked about, what John has done in his time here. The feedback was support for John. And I really appreciate this department head reaching out to me and approaching me and, being willing to provide this feedback. Because it is helpful in this decision-making process. Kind of the feedback was that, yes, they're finding that they're having to do a little bit more work than normal with John, but they quote-unquote said, but it's things we probably should have been doing already. And that's great when you have a leader that's, increasing work and increasing productivity with your staff teams, but your staff team also understands the need and the intention of having to do that. So it's great to have that feedback, because then that shows me that John is a leader that's not just coming in and making a bunch of change, but has thorough communication and the intention, and communicating the intention around that change, which is resulting in them, yes, having to do more work. I had a community member reach out to me that's on the 4th of July committee with strong feedback for John. That feedback basically revolved around big support, directly communicated, offered help, offered assistance, and this is a huge improvement. This individual could, I think they recap that 3 times, a huge improvement from what they historically have experienced with city administration, or the city administrator for the 4th of July committee. So I appreciate him being able to, support that committee and help out where needed. I also had another department head though reach out to me. I actually reached out to this department head seeking some feedback, and the feedback provided by this department head was they're a little upset, or not really upset, but they communicated a little bit of frustration, and they've had 2 meetings scheduled with John to sit down and go over, kind of their environment, their role, their department needs, their department businesses, and that opportunity has not happened yet. I'm not saying John is ignoring them or putting it off, but it just shows that John is, being very attentive to certain aspects in areas of the community, but there's possibly gaps that he's overseeing or missing. So I take that department head's feedback, I measure that at the same level as this other department head that had nothing but support for him. A personal expectation with John, and I'll just communicate that, is I was not in the meeting when John was hired, and the city commission I forget what it was, but something important popped up and kept me from being able to attend that meeting. But I did watch that meeting, the broadcasting, and then I ended up going back and watching it entirely. And John communicated in that meeting, through that interview process, that every Friday the commission's gonna receive an email, and it will just basically be a recap of weekly business operation and just an update of what's been going on for that week. He communicated that in that meeting that I did not, make it to when he was going through that interview process. So he communicated that as an expectation of what he was gonna do. Then when I met with John that first day, I did sit down with him and I said, hey, I'm here to make sure that you're successful. I want you to be as successful as possible, because if you're successful, that means that my community is, has the opportunity of being successful as well. So whatever you need from me, please make a list. This was like Thursday, I met with him. Have something for me by Monday, giving him the weekend, a couple of days, to really be able to put some, thought into it. And he ultimately took 4.5 hours of my time that day, which I'm glad he did. He communicated a lot of, things that he had concerns about, or some information he was looking. But in that meeting, he communicated every Friday, Mayor, you're gonna get an email, a review of what's gone on that week, so on and so forth, just a weekly update. I personally have not received that email yet. The commission and I have received emails as certain issues have popped up, singular scenarios. But as far as that weekly communication that he set that expectation for, it hasn't happened. And it's only disappointing because he set that expectation that he's not meeting. I didn't set that expectation for him. He communicated that to the commission first and then to me, and it's something that he's overlooking, and I'm sure he's not doing it intentionally. I'm sure he's busy, but it just shows a lack of follow-through with the expectations he's setting. So getting into kind of Elle Cole, one, I will just say, I've made a note right here, some of the best behavioral responses out of any interview that I've ever done. And I will say, I really appreciate Pivot's, questionnaire. Me personally, again, I'm not behavioral response type questions, and these are kind of generalized, and the best example I have is if we all look at question 13, it says, if a department has more work than can be accomplished with current resources, how would you approach that problem solving in that situation, and why? Every candidate provided a very general response. Go looking for the right resources and tools, if, to solve that problem. I think that's 9 out of 10 people's responses if they had that. Kind of the wording I would expect in like an interview behavior-based questionnaire would be like, tell me about a time when you had a department that had more work than can be completed or accomplished in a certain amount of time with current resources. What was your approach to attain the resources needed to solve that situation? And just pivoting that, you allow an opportunity for them to identify a very specific scenario where they had to reach into their knowledge bank, skill set, and address it very specific, and you can find a scenario to measure their behavioral adaptability and response to that scenario. Elle knocked it out of the park. It was a great response, very specific, and so that's the type of skill set and experience I think she's bringing to the table. Overall, she has not just done surface level research, she has intimately studied Boyne City. In our one-on-one meeting that I had with her, it lasted over 2.5 hours. I was struck by the depth of her knowledge. I spoke about our history, challenges, and goals as a community, and Elle was already filling in the gaps. She was showing that she had taken the time and thorough understanding as to where we are as a community, where we have been, and where we want to go. This was not just my experience, though. I also received feedback from a stakeholder that Elle met with her later on in the week, because she asked me, what business owners are in the community that I can connect with, who are good points of contacts, and I was giving her names like no other. And she met with some different stakeholders, and I followed behind her and met with those stakeholders just to kind of gauge their feedback and what was their connection like. And quote unquote, this individual's like, I was talking to her about our community and certain projects we were working on, and she was filling in the gaps, and I was like, same thing happened to me in my connection with her. So I'm glad to see that that wasn't just my experience, but also other stakeholders she reached out to. She met with a wide range of stakeholders that included the chamber director, the Main Street director, other commissioners, department heads, local business owners. She took the initiative to meet with, a broad cross-section of leadership and community members during her visit, asking thoughtful questions, building relationships, and listening closely to their insights. Elle's goal-getting attitude is evident not only in her approach this week and what she did and the connections and relationships she established in a short week, but also thorough in her resume and her career. Her resume reflects a record of achievement, innovation, and hands-on leadership. She is not only the type of leader who waits for tasks to land on her desk, clearly she displays an ability to roll up her sleeves and put in the hard work. I believe she will take the goals and objectives set by the City Commission, regardless of who's on that commission, and translate them into actionable strategic plans that move our community forward. And I'm honestly excited to have an opportunity to work in my role as an elected official with such a leader as a city manager with that type of skill set and experience. From the financial perspective, Elle brings an extraordinary track record of successes, probably some of the most impressive ones I've seen. Her resume contains, I just said that, she brings a comprehensive understanding of municipal finance, from cost reduction and investment revenue growth to securing significant grant funding. These aren't just theoretical skills, though. These are accomplishments she has already delivered in prior roles and speaks confidently about, and has knowledge, understanding about how she achieved those achievements. Elle's investment of time, energy, and presence in Boyne City this week speaks volumes about her passion and desire to be part of this community. And this is the most important aspect of the insight I can give on my decision making. She traveled here midweek, and she traveled to Boyne City on Tuesday this week. Something that even James Freed noted in our last meeting with James, that it is not easy for candidates currently serving in very demanding roles to take time to step away. Yet Elle made the time. She spent the entire week essentially engaging with our community, walking our streets, eating at our restaurants, learning what makes Boyne City so special. This was not just a job interview for her, I feel. It was a mutual exploration of fit, and she approached it with the kind of care and dedication we rarely see. I believe Elle Cole is the candidate not only because she has the strongest experience in leadership, exampled by her resume, but also the deepest desire to be a part of the community of Boyne City. She has proven that she is ready and willing to put in the work, engage our people, and to help shape a successful future in town we all deeply love. In this decision-making process, there's one thing that I'm really keeping to heart for myself personally, and that is I want to ensure the people of Boyne City that we are giving them a candidate that has a passion and a desire to be part of our community. And I strongly feel that is Elle Cole, and that's why she's my top candidate. I have bullet point lists of her financial successes. I've shared that with the commission already in a previous memo. This bullet point list is very impressive, and what I will say this, does she own all of these bullet points 100% on her own? I would say not, and it's the same scenario where, you know, I think this commission has taken some very unfounded accusations and, you know, aggressions from the community and the decision-making process that got us here, but I do not feel that one person that sits at the helm of the ship is, you know, and I've said this in the past, I give credit where credit's due. And what I'll say is basically, we all know we've had a provisional license at our airport since 2023. There are multiple issues and concerns that were addressed to the city manager for quite some time to get us from a provisional license to a proper license. Those rarely got communicated or bubbled up to the city commission. I found out recently that we've had a provisional license for multiple years now because we had, again, another document outlining issues that we've had that was never brought to a budgeting conversation, that was never brought to a capital improvement conversation after we had to fight for 3 years for that. Another example I can give is we fought tooth and nail for 3 years to have public access property permanently landmarked. And I'm using this as an example because that has been a very contentious issue with our residents, amongst the city commission. Emotions have ran wild, frustrations have gone through the roof, because one individual did not have a priority to get 2 wooden stakes put into the ground, showing our public access points for our community members. So clearly you can see, even though she might not own 100% of all of this, she prioritized those goals and objectives, which led to very, very impressive financial successes and achievements. And again, I don't feel if Elle Cole was in the position we would have to fight for 3 years to get wooden stakes put into public access points. I feel it would be a no-brainer in what her approach would be, how she would develop a strategic plan around that, and the timeline of that priority being achieved, even though it might not be hers. So those are kind of my thought processes, my decision-making process. I'm sure I've missed some points here that I've gotten written down amongst all these pieces of paper here. Overall, I think every candidate is, you know, a great candidate. I think they're doing great things in their community currently. And I applaud any city manager that steps into that role specifically, because I can tell you it's hard to sit on this side of the table. It's not easy sitting at a city manager's desk, I can tell you that also. I've never done it, but I have a lot of insight to it, and it's a contentious environment, that's for sure. It's a hard environment to navigate. So those are my thoughts. We can kind of walk through what the ranking was, but before we do that, I just want to have, you know, James speak to kind of what he's heard amongst each one of us commissioners talking about our perspectives and positions on these candidates and kind of how he recommends we navigate moving forward.
Well, it appears to me you have a consensus candidate. It's a strong number 2 for you as well. So
Yeah, absolutely.
So
That's what I was gonna say.
So to me, you have a candidate that is a consensus candidate, and you have no one saying, I don't support this person, which is really nice because it provides you guys all a clean slate moving forward with a unified candidate. So for me, it's evident, to me, it's, you've picked your lead candidate. You need to formalize that motion. What that would do then would be allow me to begin working on a sample draft contract with your city attorney and the candidate. We always have they're pretty standardized, to be quite frank. City manager contracts are pretty standardized at this point, industry standard. And so there'd be a few points that we want to work with your city attorney to adhere to your charter specifics of your charter, but that process moves pretty quickly.
Alright. I'll make a motion that the city commission select Elle as the lead or preferred candidate for the city manager role and for a background check to be conducted in tandem with proceeding with contract negotiations, which should involve the city attorney Matt Cross.
Support.
Further discussion? Roll call please, Jessica.
Lassiter.
Aye.
Nemecheck.
Aye.
Barrow.
Aye.
Moody.
Aye.
Pritchard.
Aye.
The motion's carried.
Okay, James, if you don't mind, I know you're trying to get out of here as soon as you can. But let's just kind of walk through the background process. I know we have the option to use near firm, internal, we talked about that last night. I kind of gave you like some concerns that the commission might have from our recent experiences. I think we gave each candidate a copy of our in-house form, so if we're gonna do it in-house, we can quickly expedite that process. What are your thoughts? And then we'll go through the commission to see what the preference is to either have your firm do it or do it in-house.
So at this point, you're